famous British philosopher Bertrand Russell states, "The more intense has been the religion of any period, and the more profound has been the dogmatic belief, the greater has been the cruelty, and the worse has been the state of affairs." Albert Einstein, scientist, states, "I cannot imagine a God who rewards and punishes the objects of his creation, whose purposes are modeled after our own. A God, in short, who is but a reflection of human frailty. Neither can I believe that the individual survives the death of his body, although feeble souls harbor such thoughts through fear or ridiculous egotism."
Hello and welcome again to Atheists of Florida Forum. I'm Dr. Albert Eling Zeidetson, host, moderator, critic, devil's advocate, and occasionally other things too on this show. Today's show is going to be called Christian Political Hostility, and we are pleased to have three guests with us. And to start with, we have once again been blessed with the presence of Brent Yashu, who is the what are you at this time, Brent? You fill us in. All the titles, I forgot.
Well, I'm working on my doctorate at Florida State University. I am the president of the Humanists of the Suncoast. I'm the vice president of a chapter of this group and a board member. I'm also on the state board of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and have affiliations with a number of other organizations. And I guess if you're the devil's advocate, I must be the God's advocate on this show, which on this show I would think that would be the same thing.
Are you, or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
No, I haven't been, but I was almost as bad. I was a Baptist once.
Okay, well, thank you for filling us in. Nan, once again, welcome, and you tell us what you are.
I'm the owner of Professional Resources, a marketing communications firm. On the more relevant side, I'm a member of the board of directors for the Atheists of Florida, as well as the Humanists of Florida, and also the Humanists of the Suncoast.
Well, thank you and welcome again. And once again, we're very honored and pleased to have Ed Golly with us, who is my vice president for
Always
Atheists
fun
of Florida.
to be here, yes.
Welcome, Ed.
I'm on the board and the director of the Tampa chapter of this whole operation.
Well, thank you once again for being with us. Today we have a hot item for you all, and what we're going to discuss today specifically is called the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, and its proposed guidelines on harassment based upon race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or disability. And in case you missed it, the word religion did appear in there. So to get us started, I'd like to elaborate a little bit for our viewers, and then we'll open it for discussion. The guidelines for sexual harassment in part state that harassment includes remarks, suggestions, innuendo, or other types of gestures or language which promote a hostile or uncomfortable type of atmosphere in the workplace. Also, another definition for harassment has been a case where a person is given requests which they are not in a position to easily refuse, or they must feel that they have to comply with. Now, in the case of sexual harassment, this usually means a case where somebody is requested to give a sexual favor by a boss, for instance, where they feel uncomfortable because they feel they might have to do this, otherwise they might lose their job or not get a promotion. In keeping with these kinds of guidelines for harassment, the EEOC has come up with a new criteria, namely religious harassment. Specifically, what it's concerned with is this. Suppose your boss is an atheist, and you're a Christian, and your boss asks you to attend an atheist's meeting, and you're up for a promotion. How does that make you feel? Rather uncomfortable, I would think. Suppose you have another situation where you, as a Christian at this point, are proselytizing your employees and telling them to attend church, to attend Bible readings. How do you think your employees feel? Don't you think they feel uncomfortable? This is the sort of thing the EEOC is concerned with under the rubric of religious harassment. And so to open this to further discussion, perhaps, Ed, you can elaborate on this.
Sure. The guidelines had been spelled out and tested in court with respect to, I think, sexual harassment and I believe national origin. And the other aspects of this rather broad guideline included age, disability, and religion, which we're speaking about. And they just had not really been specifically clarified, so the EEOC proposed to come in and just elaborate on these a little bit more to address the examples that you've just given us, okay? And so it's really a very innocent thing just to give us a good guideline for employers and employees so that we don't just ignore this. Well, the intriguing thing to us as atheists is the almost predictable knee-jerk reaction of the Christian right to take a situation like that and just so blatantly distort it that we don't have any clear-cut information or knowledge about what really the EEOC is trying to do. So I'm intrigued by this thing that I saw that was passed out among a workplace somewhere. It just got sent in, and let me show you how this concept can be completely distorted. I'll just read this directly, it's so short. This change is to be voted on soon by the U.S. Congress. If this broad revision is given final approval and religion is included in the EEOC harassment guidelines, it will mean a religion-free workplace. Therefore, no sharing your faith on lunch break or saying a prayer. No devotionals or gospel signs around your desk. No religious jewelry. No inviting a coworker to your church. Or the possible response could be that your employer can be sued for religious harassment in the workplace, just the same as sexual harassment, or you could be reprimanded or terminated. Well, of course, that's the total fabrication of reality and what these guidelines are proposing. But it's a scare tactic. It gets people to do just what it says here. The Christian community should flood the EEOC and Congress with comments on this. And, of course, they're collectively a powerful group. So even though the reaction of the person that would read this is totally divergent from what's going on, Congress winds up seeing a powerful response from a group, a particular group, Christian right, and believes that they are going to have to accommodate these people in decisions about this and may even wind up just leaving it out for political purposes.
I think it's fair to also say that what most people who react to this don't realize is that the feeling of intimidation and insecurity one not of the same religion feels if a boss or even a coworker who is in with the boss says, well, by the way, why don't you come out to a Bible study meeting tonight? And the person who does the proselytizing, I think, might have very good intentions and not realize that their sincerity notwithstanding, this could be profoundly uncomfortable for someone not of the same persuasion.
Actually, Albert, I'm really glad you brought that up because I wanted to address something, the beginning remarks that you made. First off, I would have to say that most, and I have my own little conjecture theory about the reason why this absurd reaction has been happening. But first off, I have to say, most Christian employers have no clue as to how other people would feel if they say, well, we're going to have a prayer meeting and you have to attend. You have to attend a mandatory prayer breakfast. They think, the only way I can compare their thinking is to the attitude of a male who says, well, I'm going to rape you and don't worry, once you get into it, you'll enjoy it. I mean, that's frankly the way that they think. They have no conception of the idea that anyone could possibly have anything against a prayer meeting. However,
also, they think that they're doing you a favor.
Well, exactly.
Right.
As I said, it's just like the attitude of a very sick-minded male who says, by raping you, I'm doing you a favor. You just don't realize it yet. And they feel the same way. But the other thing is that I think there's a lot of fear of, and something I noted particularly in here that the EEOC put out in their response to someone asking for more information. They said, suppose there was a secular humanist who was attacking or belittling your religious beliefs all the time. This would allow you to sue that person for harassment. So I kind of think that the reason why, and again, this is purely conjecture, because obviously it's not something they would want known, but I sometimes think that the reason why that the religious right is actually behind this law, and they're trying to make it sound like something really absurd, to get their people up in arms and provoke a reaction perhaps from more liberal-minded people who say, well, you know, maybe this isn't such a bad idea if the religious right goes against it. And they're worrying, one, that their religious beliefs, since their religious beliefs won't stand up to a reasonable examination, whereas atheism does, they're more worried about someone in the workplace being able to say, well, now wait a minute, what is this thing you're talking about? Let's examine this logically. So I think that might be part of it too, is that, you know, they're more afraid and they're really looking for protection. I have to look at it from the viewpoint of, you know, who we have in office. A lot of people talk about Bill Clinton and they say, well, he's just a liberal. He's a godless politician, which is amazing because Bill Clinton has been one of the friendliest presidents to religion that we have had, in some ways even more friendly than Reagan and Bush. He's invited, I think it was 100 quote-unquote religious leaders. I think that's an oxymoron, but he's invited 100 religious people to come and have a breakfast with him and advise him on policy issues. That's something that no other president has officially done.
Well, I think along those lines, it could well be noted that the religious right, namely the Christian fundamentalists, have been extremely well organized, and they have gotten a disproportionate amount of coverage in the press. And this, I think, inflates their actual importance as in the political landscape. However, I think what we need to focus on is that the obvious problem here is that people don't realize if they are in a minority religion, it doesn't even have to be an atheist. It could be a Jewish individual, a Buddhist individual, whatnot, how uncomfortable that person feels when somebody in a position of authority, with good intentions, mind you, says, by the way, why don't you come to this Bible?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an order, it doesn't have to be a demand, it could be a request. And it could be totally innocent, and they don't realize the discomfort and the onus of pressure it puts upon someone.
And the fact that without any guidelines set by the government, look at the extreme to which that can be carried. Really very blatant pressure to comply with an employer, for example's religious agenda in order to keep the job, in which case, if we're going to be consistent in our protection of workers with regard to their age or their national origin or disabilities that they might have, then this falls right into that same guideline. The bottom line is that none of this stuff that we read about is true. None of it's true under the proposed guidelines. They're not saying that you can't wear a little cross as a piece of jewelry. There's nobody saying that you can't ask your coworker to go to church with you if you want, and the coworker can say yes or no. That isn't harassment. That's not even close to what this agenda is, but this is how it's portrayed by the religious right.
I think we see the same hysteria here as has occurred with sexual harassment. Granted that what constitutes any kind of harassment is a nebulous, amorphous, vague concept, but I think most people can agree that if a boss says to a coworker or an employee, you have to sleep with me, otherwise you don't get the job, that's a pretty clear case that the person having the request made to is in no position to really argue much about it. And on the other hand, of course, you don't want to say that just because somebody makes an off-color joke or a vague sexual allusion that therefore that's harassment, in the same way that if somebody makes a vague religious
Sure, and any law, enforcement of any law can be abused. You know, the littlest thing can generate a lawsuit. But that's akin to saying we shouldn't have any laws because of the potential consequences of it. We can't use that as a guidepost to decide whether or not we're going to bring these guidelines into being.
Well, go ahead, Nat.
Yeah, that's an important point. For one thing, you know, this whole thing has gotten out of context. First of all, religion was listed in a whole series of issues that have been on Title VII for a long, long time. But a large group of people has jumped on just this one issue. The employers themselves have asked for these guidelines. It mentions a series of issues that may not be discriminated in the workplace. Specific laws and case law has been passed that works with some of these others. Age, you have the ADEA, which is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. Disability, you have the ADA, Americans with Disability Act. For sexual harassment, of course, we have a large amount of case law at this point and specific regulations that lead to that. So the employers are saying, but look, there's these others as well, and we need some guidelines so that we don't get sued, because they're amorphous, they're out there. What does constitute harassment in these areas? And certainly any of these areas can constitute harassment. But you see that these people have grabbed onto this one issue, ignoring all the rest and ignoring its potential, like any others, to be to create an atmosphere in which a person cannot function well, or is denied promotion or employment, or something that has nothing to do with their ability and their actual work performance.
Or it just makes them downright nervous to go to work.
Yeah, because in the religious mind, if you don't have religion, you have a void that needs to be filled.
Correct.
That can't be construed to the religious mind as harassment.
Jumping.
Doing you a favor to bring you into this flock.
Well, I think Nan's point is very perceptive, though, that the religious right wants to somehow portray this as a sinister government, secular humanist plot to restrict religious freedom, when, as if I understand you correctly, this was a response to public pressure by employers saying, look, we don't know what to do here, give us some guidance.
Well, jumping off of my God's advocate position for a minute here, something I'd like to point out is that the idea of the extreme that they talk about, the idea of a totally religion-free workplace, I have to ask, what would be wrong with that? I mean, that's not saying that you can't practice your religion at home or go to your church or do whatever you want to do, but when did the idea come about that a business is not a business and is a place where people should be debating? I mean, frankly, I have to say that as an atheist, you know, I would feel that a place of business that I was the owner of, I wouldn't want to be debating with my employees about their religion all the time, because they're not going to be doing any work if they're doing that. You know, I mean, whether they were Christians or Muslims or Jews or whatever they were, a place of business is a place where you conduct your business, and religion has nothing to do with that. And
I guess it's like the old joke, you want to discuss religion in my company? Fine, I'll come to your sermon and discuss my business products.
well, exactly. I mean, if I'm a, you know, if I'm an Amway distributor, if you want to come and discuss your church in my Amway business, I'll go and do my Amway talks at your church
On Sunday morning.
on Sunday
and that
mornings.
same attitude spills into the prayer in school issue, the protection of abortion clinics, that that bill that was signed in by the president just recently.
Finally.
Yeah.
Well, if I may,
well overdue. Sure.
if I may pick on that, actually I was going to draw an analogy there that, again, with the recent law passed that besides the fact that protesters must stay within a certain distance of an abortion clinic where people are seeking a legal medical procedure and assistance, furthermore, if they block entrance or egress to this clinic and they have to be extricated away from the clinic, the organization, for example, Operation Rescue, is liable for the costs to police or fire department or paramedics to move them out of there. And many have indeed violently done this, and now there's a strong reaction saying this infringes upon religious freedom. I ask you and my viewers, what do you think would happen if we atheists, secular humanists, were to chain ourselves to the door of your church on a Sunday morning, refusing you to get in because we don't want you to be mesmerized or in some way brainwashed or made into a unthinking animal, because we think it's for your own good to stay out of that church? What kind of reaction do you think you would have if atheists were to blockade church entrances on Sunday mornings?
First off,
Standing on our
somebody'd probably
Constitution.
shoot at us.
Yeah, and it would be
mean,
justified shooting, wouldn't it?
If we acted the way that the religionists do, the anti-abortionists did, who shot Dr. Gunn, for example, you know, if we chained ourselves in front of a church, they'd shoot at us.
Definitely.
You know,
To hell with our
to hell with our
constitutional right to
with our
assemble wherever we
constitutional
want,
right
or
or First Amendment rights. They don't care about First Amendment rights as long if it doesn't work in their favor. They are perfectly happy to shoot a doctor. And matter of fact, besides Dr. Gunn, there was another doctor who was shot at who didn't die. I guess they shot him in the arm. There have been clinics that have been attacked with people that have squirted acid through the doors, firebombed. Bill Baird, who was recently a guest at the Humanists of Florida annual conference, talked about the things that had happened to him. His house had been shot at. I mean, they don't care about freedom of speech. They care only about pushing their religious viewpoint, forcing their religious viewpoint on other people. Now, I'm not saying that everybody who's religious is like this. I mean, there are a lot of people, I would say the majority of people, who have a religion and act like normal, decent human beings in spite of their religion.
You never know if they get that warm feeling inside when something happens.
Well,
you never really know.
But from speaking to such people, and I think most religious people are not of this caliber, I think they're profoundly uncomfortable and embarrassed by the so-called zealots out there. Well, if I can perhaps elaborate on this, take it one step further, I have a prophecy. And I think that what's going to happen next...
You're going to be our Nostradamus here?
Yeah, I'm going to be Nostradamus for 1 minute.
In other words, it's going to be wrong.
No, I think it might actually happen. The next thing I see the EEOC doing is adding to this list, which if I may repeat, race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, or disability. The next category you're going to see on there is sexual preference. What do you think the religious right will do when one of the things you may not harass someone over is their sexual preference?
Well, I want to point out one thing already. The term sexual preference is inaccurate.
Okay.
Orientation.
Okay, I should correct it.
Preference is often used by the religious right because the assumption that is done is that it's a preference, a choice.
It's a voluntary choice.
It's a voluntary choice. I've known a few gay people in my life, and I don't think any one of them has ever mentioned anything about having a choice in the matter. As a matter of fact, I think most of them would really prefer if they had a choice, they would much rather be, I mean, not all it may apply to, but much of them would much rather be heterosexual simply because it would make life one hell of a lot easier for them. I mean, let's face it, who would choose, who in their right mind would choose to join a minority that was harassed and picked on and despised, you know, if they had a choice? I mean,
the concept is absurd. Nobody would choose that. It's an awareness.
Thomas Jefferson, in a way, said the same thing about atheists. He said that he didn't think that people chose whether or not they had a belief in God. They believed or disbelieved. Primarily, they disbelieved because they could not believe. And I would say that that applies to most of us. I mean, let's face it. If there were a way that I could rationally, logically justify a belief, sure, that'd make my life a heck of a lot easier. I could just join the crowd and, you know, do whatever they do and go along and not rock the boat. But my mind will not allow me to accept absurdities.
But getting back to your prophecy, when this as a single issue is introduced into the guidelines, can you imagine the response that we're going to see? I mean, it's going to be an uproar. We've got another devil to work on.
The reason I brought that up is because I received, as I said earlier, some literature from the Corwich Presbyterian Church run by Dr. James Kennedy. And I see a slight shift of focus, and perhaps this is just a temporary fad, or maybe it's a premonition of things to come. But it seems that the Christian right is reorienting itself and its focus from an anti-abortion concern to an anti-gay rights concern. And this is understandable because we have seen in the last year or two a rather strong surfacing of gay pride and gay political power, and this is going to be rightly perceived as a threat.
Vehement opposition to it here in our state.
Well, some of that also, I think, has to do with the practical considerations. I mean, with RU 486 becoming legal in this country and becoming available in this country, there won't be abortion clinics anymore.
Well, there will be abortion clinics.
There will be abortion clinics,
need for them.
But there will be many fewer of them, and if someone wants to avoid the hassle of going to an abortion clinic, they'll be able to go to their local clinic or local doctor and get a prescription for RU 486. So it will no longer be as much of a problem. Also, they've lost in the courts over and over again over the abortion issue. And many of the candidates that they've tried to run, once the candidates came out as strong anti-abortionists, they lost as well.
Well, I think that that's probably a good point, is that after a while, what happens is if a group sees it's losing political momentum, in desperation, it turns to more and more radical tactics, as we see with Operation Rescue, and in order to reorient its focus upon some other agenda.
The real fanatics are staying there, and the ones that aren't quite as fanatic are just changing, let's shoot at this target.
Definitely. And if I may, I bring us to one concluding point. It's rather interesting what has happened here from my observation. What you had previously was, of course, the so-called religious individual always proclaiming or being, how can I put this, accused of being the one who stifles freedom of speech. Now the tables have been turned. They're the ones saying, we're the victims, you are restricting our speech. And if I may say so, they have done it very successfully because they have a lot of sympathy out there. Because when they use extremist propaganda like you just showed us, Ed, it makes it appear like if you even were a cross on your lapel, you're going to be fired for your job. Right. And this straw man argumentation has, I think, many people in an uproar saying, well, this is too far. Little do they realize that the guidelines being proposed are very benign and fairly moderate.
It's the old kicking, we're kicking God out of the country concept. What utter nonsense.
Sure, what we have is an overreaction, and many people who don't understand what the guideline really proposes are going to, in fact, think, uh-oh, this is Stalinist Russia coming down the line.
Well, actually, it's a deliberate distortion because there's very strong case law of suits brought about religious issues, clothing, and things like that, in which almost all of the cases, the individual was upheld unless it could be shown that their religious expression was actually injurious to their to the place of business or to their performance.
It's the old idea of shouting, shouting fire in a crowded theater. You can shout fire in a crowded theater if you are on the stage and it's part of the play, if there actually is a fire.
But you may not do so falsely.
You may not do so falsely and injuring other people.
Well, and any right is going to have some kind of restriction upon it.
Absolutely.
And that is indeed the case. Well, upon that most sobering note, I'd like to invite you viewers that if you would like to know more about atheism, please write to us at the addresses on the closing credits, and we'll be pleased to send you The Truth About Atheism, a most informative pamphlet, and we will also send you, if you like, our newsletter, Atheists of Florida, and this is a beautiful newsletter produced by our own Ed Golly. Thank you, Ed, for your excellent job, and Brent also, and Nan also. Thank you all for having been with us, and once again, I'm Dr. Albert E. Langs-Idison saying goodbye.